Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast, the show that brings you latest insights, thought leadership, and stories from across the global mining industry. In today's episode, we have Adam McKinnon, who's the CEO of Advanced Metals, a company rapidly building one of the more exciting silver growth stories in Mexico. Advanced has assembled a portfolio exceeding 100 million ounces of the silver equivalent across the prolific Sierra Madre Belt, positioning itself at the center of growing global conversation around silver supply, electrification, and precious metals demand. In this episode, we're going to discuss the strategy behind consolidating a district-scale silver platform in Mexico, the significance of the recent Yoquivo JORC Resource, and why the company believes that is substantial upside still to come from its exploration pipeline. We're also going to explore Adam's views on leadership in mining, balancing geology with capital markets, the importance of local expertise, and where he sees the biggest opportunities emerging in the precious metals exploration over the next decade. So, Adam, great to have you on the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Really enjoying this recent run in precious metals, to be fair.
Yeah, as we were speaking offline, and at the time of this recording, silver is a little bit down, but I'm sure that will pick back up over the coming weeks anyway. So, as we always start these podcasts off, just wondering if you just tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your career, from obviously back in the day when you graduated through to today. So I hand it over to you to tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
No problem. I've taken a bit of an unconventional route. I'm actually a trained chemist. So I've come in sort of through the back door into the mining industry. I have a PhD in chemistry, but with a focus on the chemistry of minerals, and that's how I got an interest in mineralogy to start with, and then metallurgy, and then moving through into geology. Worked underground at a mine, and then moved into exploration. And I've been lucky enough to make a couple of major discoveries in New South Wales in my time, two of which are actually now being mined by separate companies.
Great. So I just wondering if you can just give us an overview or snapshot of Advanced Metals before I go into some obviously more questions.
Yeah, so Advanced Metals is a relatively young company in its current form. It's actually had a pretty interesting history. It was previously focusing on coking coal, actually in British Columbia, in Canada. Around 2020, the company pivoted out of that when sort of coal wasn't doing so well, and decided to move into copper gold. It was picked up sort of as a shell in 2024, completely recapitalized. And it was around that time that the idea was born to actually start to vend some of these really good quality silver assets into the company. At the time, silver price was still, modest, still quite low. All of our assets were actually picked up prior to the recent run in the silver price. So we've always been strong on silver, but the key point is where we are in Mexico. Your viewers may very well know that around 25% of the world's silver actually comes from the Sierra Madre Belt in Mexico. So if you're looking for silver and gold and copper for that matter, Mexico, absolutely fantastic place. Look, and there's heaps and heaps of assets across that belt, and they're not just owned by Mexican entities. There's a lot of Canadian majors in the area. There's a lot of US majors in the area. So it is an area you can mine. It is an area you can explore, and it's prolific, and that's why we're there. Just to finish that point, I guess the opportunity for us that when you look on the ASX, there's actually only one other company, Mithril Resources, that has any material resources in terms of silver in Mexico. So we are now the second company with significant resources in Mexico, and we're looking to build those resources and really become a significant player in that region.
Great. You're rapidly building a 100 million ounce silver equivalent portfolio across Mexico. But what was the vision behind consolidating these projects in the Sierra Madre Belt, and how do they complement each other strategically?
Yeah, look, they all sit in the same sort of geological terrain, if you will. They're in and amongst some significant major producers, and I can give you an example. Our Gavilanes project that we're drilling at the moment, it's located about 23 kilometers from the San Dimas mine, which is held by First Majestic. It is absolutely a world-class mining area, San Dimas. 12 million ounces of gold, nearly 600 million ounces of silver over its life. We're only 23 Ks away from that. The big thing for us was really about the location, the upside, but also the price. And this is something when I tell people they don't actually believe me, but we've pulled together this plus 100 million ounce silver equivalent portfolio now for a total current cost of less than 5 million US dollars. So absolutely fantastic. And as we go on, I can tell you a little bit about the upside in each. And that's the thing that's actually really exciting. We're taking these quite small resources or medium-sized resources at the moment, and we've got this pretty simple plan actually to grow those resources, convert them to JORC. They're all NI 43-101. That's another thing in Australia. People don't necessarily believe that the Canadian system exists or that the resources aren't real. In actual fact, the two codes, the JORC code and NI 43-101, are actually pretty comparable. So we are going through that process though of converting to JORC, and I think that will also give us a bit of recognition on the ASX and globally as we do that.
Yeah, obviously talking about JORC, your recent Yoquivo JORC resource in validating Advance's broader strategy of building large scale, high grade silver platform in Mexico. How important was that recent JORC resource?
It's been an incredible process this is basically our first asset. So we wanted to be, we wanted to be able to prove that we can operate effectively, efficiently in this jurisdiction. As I mentioned, we're only a new company and we haven't held assets in Mexico for a long period of time. So it was really important that we got off to a solid start with Yoquivo, which was actually the first asset we picked up in October 2024. So um, when we got in and had a look at the project, it wasn't just the upside we noticed, it was the fact that the previous explorer actually hadn't assayed a significant proportion of the core. And one of our aha moments for this particular project is we went, well, I mean, that's a free kick for us. We identified about 5,000 meters of unsampled core. It cost us about a couple of $100,000, that's it, to go and re-assay all of that material. The very first batch we put in had up to 850 grams per ton silver equivalent in material they just left behind and not assayed. And that was the first point we went, well, okay, this could be a little bit different to what we first thought. Super high grade, narrow vein. And the big thing we've seen now is we're getting these plus 100 meter long intercepts in some places from the existing data that suggests, well, hang on a second, maybe this isn't just a narrow vein, small tonnage type resource. It actually has potential as a bulk tonnage, potentially open cut resource. And so not only was the process of converting the JORC resource important, it was also the process of reinterpreting the geology and the mining potential of the particular project.
This episode is sponsored by Mining International. In today's market, finding the right mining talent isn't easy. Mining International works closely with mining companies to identify and secure senior and technical professionals through a tailored search approach. If you're hiring or exploring your options, you can contact Rob Tyson via the show notes to start a conversation today.
Your other project, Gavilanes, already hosts some spectacular historical silver grades, but only a small proportion of the broader system has actually been tested. How significant could the upside be if the current drilling confirms scale obviously beyond the existing resource footprint?
Yeah, so immediately following that, the drill out we did for Yoquivo, we moved our team down to Gavilanes. It's further south. It's about 450 k's to the south by road, and it's in an area, as I mentioned at the start, very close to San Dimas. The really interesting thing about it, it's only had less than 10,000 meters of drilling. We might think, well, that's quite incredible to have, a prospect so close to a known mining area and not have only had that small amount of drilling. The other really interesting thing about the deposits, all that drilling's been done in a single area. So about 700 meters of strike has been drilled. Interestingly, tens of kilometers of silver veining has been mapped at surface. And outside of that main area, there's actually not a single drill hole. So when we talk about upside potential, it's absolutely incredible. Now, I guess part of the reason it hasn't been drilled is got to do with sort of a convoluted ownership history. In the past, it was held by a royalty company who actually didn't do any drilling. And prior to that, the company did do some drilling, but was really very focused on high-grade underground and getting it up into mining as soon as possible. So there wasn't any real systematic exploration of the broader system. We kicked off drilling within about about 3 weeks ago now, actually. We're looking to extend it basically in multiple directions. We know it's open at depth. We know it's open in multiple orientations along strike, and on a lot of these veins, our drilling will actually seek to double the known strike extent of the system. Now, obviously, we're hoping we'll have some good success with this extensional drilling, but the potential's there for doubling of the existing resource. It already has a 22 million ounce resource. We are hopeful, obviously subject to drilling results, that we could get 30, 40, maybe even 50 million ounces when we do our JORC resource upgrade. And you can see there that we're starting to build across our portfolio as we go to each project, converting, adding value. We're also going to resample some of the material that wasn't sampled down there, same as Yoquivo. So it's just a systematic approach to drilling, looking at the geology, looking at the sampling, and then converting these resources to JORC.
As you mentioned in the introduction, you're obviously a chemist by background, and you've had a unconventional career path, but you've worked across obviously technical geology, exploration management, and corporate development. How important is it for mining executives today to sort of balance geological understanding, obviously, with capital market strategy?
Well, I think they go hand in hand. It's all well and good to have a great pitch, a great corporate story, and even great backing, but you really do need that technical excellence, the technical nous to follow it up. Now, if you don't have it yourself, you need to have a team around you that you can trust, that is going to be applying science. I mean, I'm a scientist by training, and I keep coming back to it. When you look at these projects systematically and scientifically, you often get a lot further than when you take an ad hoc approach, which is the case with a surprising number of projects, not just in Mexico, but in Australia and other places in the world, where there's no real science put into exploration and even into mining. Sometimes I've seen cases of that as well, where it seems to be counterproductive. So it's really important. I think I've had a really great training for what I'm doing now. I've been involved all the way from the greenfields exploration stage through mine development, metallurgy, marketing, and then in through to production, and even capital raising, which are all important components to getting a mine up and running.
Yeah. And obviously you mentioned about how important teams are, and you've assembled a very experienced in-country team and advisory network in Mexico. How critical is local expertise and relationship building when operating in a major mining jurisdiction?
It's absolutely critical. And look, I've done a lot of exploration in Australia. And we regularly used expats. It's a very common theme in Australia that we use expats. But we made a decision pretty early that we're going to have a team in Mexico that was almost entirely Mexican. Now, that's important because you've got people who are working very intimately with the community there, and you want Mexican nationals to be interacting with Mexican nationals in these places. We know from the news that there is a little bit of tension in Mexico at times between mining and the community. So we consider that really, really important. Not just that, we've got a team of consultants that we use who are in-country consultants. So we've got a team of legal experts, environmental experts, community experts that we lean on, based in Mexico City and other places, to help us execute our technical programs. Also, obviously, we're building those relationships with the communities we're operating in. And look, and the last thing is, we're a new company. We need that in-country expertise. To get this done efficiently. We don't want to be in a position where we're making trip ups, especially with community and environment. We want to be doing everything right from the get-go, and that in-country experience is absolutely invaluable. I'll just add to that, we managed to, through the process of picking up our first project, we actually managed to get a significant number of the team that worked on that project to start with to come over and work for us. And that also gave us this continuity of knowledge about what was done previously, relationships with the community, and it smoothed that whole process out significantly.
Yeah. I wonder if you just tell us a bit about what's happening in Mexico at the moment, and obviously talking about the mining industry. So to give us our audience an update in what is actually happening in the mining industry in Mexico.
Yeah, so I guess the thing about Mexico is it's not monolithic. It's people don't realize it is an absolutely enormous country. Some people don't. I know some people do. Just an interesting stat. It's actually got 31 states. So yeah, it is an incredible large and diverse country. So having said that, there are good parts of Mexico to operate in, and there are not so good parts of Mexico to operate in. So people may have heard a lot of the issues recently with Bisla and others have been in the Sinaloa area. One of the things that we did when we were acquiring these projects, almost the first thing we did was not what is the project, but where is it? There are a number of projects we just immediately discounted. We didn't even look at them because we knew they were in areas that had issues either with community, previous community issues, or known cartel and crime issues. In terms of the cartels, look, in the areas we operate in, particularly Yoquivo and Gavilanes, where we've done most of our work, we haven't actually had any issues with the cartels at this stage. I put that down mainly to the fact that both of these projects are in sort of out of the way areas. They're a little bit more remote. They're a little bit away from major thoroughfares and away from major towns. Um, it's not to say we haven't, increased our precautions in terms of what we do when we're operating. We're always thinking about our team's safety, but we have been able to operate fairly effectively. And I can also say that for the two projects we've worked on so far, Gavilanes and Yoquivo, we know that the previous operators never had any issues with the cartels in those areas either. So there's been some sort of history over the last decade or so. We know that these projects are okay to operate in. Now, things can change, and we monitor it. But I mentioned at the start, there are a number of multinational, international companies that are operating effectively and safely in these areas. So it's not a showstopper, but yeah, you do need to be aware, obviously, of what's going on, and just taking precautions where necessary, which our team do.
If we look at silver demand, it's obviously increasingly tied to solar, electrification, advanced technologies. Do you think the mining industry is prepared for the scale of silver demand growth that could emerge over the sort of next decade and longer?
Oh, the short answer is no. And I think when you look at all the forecasts that's borne out, um, supply is predicted to outstrip demand quite significantly as we run up in past 2030. I think, as you're probably aware, part of the issue with silver is it's often produced as a byproduct of other commodities. It's not necessarily easy if you don't have a silver only deposit to ramp up silver production specifically. Obviously, in Mexico, there are a lot of silver or silver gold deposits where you can do that. But in a lot of parts of the world, production is very heavily tied to base metals or other elements, which does make it actually quite hard to ramp up. I guess the other thing that doesn't necessarily help from the mining side and from the exploration side is that I think there's still a perception, when I talk to people, this is what I see, that silver may drop back down to its lows of the previous years. I don't know that there's an appreciation or uh, I don't know if there's a belief yet that silver is going to maintain these levels. So I think what we'll probably see that if it does maintain at these levels, or these elevated levels for an extended period of time, we will start to see more money flowing in to both ramping up exploration and then ramping up production. Big problem, obviously, with exploration is there's always that lead time between putting the money in the ground for exploration and converting that to production. So look, we're doing our part. We certainly want to get some of our projects through that process of exploration, resource definition, and up towards mining. But we're a drop in the ocean, and I still think there's a potential for silver to go significantly higher as demand increases in the coming years.
There's obviously a lot of discussion around declining global discovery rates, and I suppose we can speak about many commodities. But in your view, where are the biggest opportunities still being overlooked in precious metals exploration?
Yeah, so obviously, when you look at all of the statistics, we're seeing that not only are discovery rates declining, average grades are declining as well, and also the depth of discovery is increasing. So all of those things put together mean that, in theory, for each ounce you discover of gold or silver, um, it's going to be more expensive to define and more expensive to mine. Um, I think my experience is that there's a lot of benefit to be had through new technologies. Certainly in exploration, we're using a lot of things that you just weren't around even 10 years ago. And I can point to one that we're using now extensively, high resolution LiDAR surveys. They're an absolute game changer in parts of the world where you've got dense cover. I've also seen multiple this issue in the industry where some people have called the fallacy of the deep. People are saying the only place you're going to find deposits anymore are deeper or undercover. But my experience is, and I gave an example before, that there's a lot of value to be unlocked by looking differently at some of the exploration that's already been done. And I think there are a lot of discoveries actually hiding in plain sight as well. They just need some new thinking, a little bit of new science sometimes, and hopefully we can get those rates up. I'm still a little bit pessimistic that we'll be able to keep up with the demand, and not just for silver, but for other metals as well. Copper being an obvious example of another metal that is suffering from that problem at the moment. But I am also optimistic that as we move along, these new technologies, potentially AI as well, will help expedite some of these exploration and discovery processes.
Obviously, the industry is evolving quickly with better geophysics, AI, geological modelling tools. What innovations do you think will generally change discovery success rates over the next 5 or 10 years, and which ones may be being overhyped?
Well, well, it's a loaded question for me. Look, I'm pretty optimistic that just technology in general. I'm not sure AI is there yet. I think what we'll see with AI, it'll make a lot of our workflows that we do in geology, exploration, and mining streamlined. It will replace some manual tasks that we used to do, in a manner of speaking. I still think it's not quite there in terms of the creativity and different thinking you need when you're trying to make these discoveries. But that's not to say in the near term, it's amazing the rate these things are evolving. There's a very good chance that we may get there in the near future. In terms of some of the other techniques, I- I'm very interested in some of the new satellite-based techniques that are being utilized now to try and find some of these more remote deposits. We've utilized some of those ourselves on some of our projects, and also a whole number of new tools coming in terms of things like assaying as well, which are reducing turnaround times for assays. Another really big issue for our industry at the moment. So I'm pretty positive that that technology will help all the way through the value chain from discovery through to mining.
Um, Going back to obviously advanced metals, you've spoken about being a focused precious metals portfolio rather than simply accumulating just projects. What do you look for in a project that gives you confidence it can become a genuine long-term asset for shareholders?
Yeah, so the key things I look at, we've mentioned a couple of them already. Location, and that's not just location in terms of access and community, it's geological provenance. So when we say the Sierra Madre it produces 25% of the world's silver, that's obviously a good place to be looking for more silver deposits. The other thing I like to see is we're always looking for that potential to add quickly to the resource base. That's one of the key things we look at when we're evaluating a project. What have they done so far? What could we do better? Where can we add ounces potentially very quickly? Can we think about the project a little bit differently to the way it's been thought about previously? And you put all those things together. In the example of Yoquivo, we picked that project up for $550,000 Canadian, and it's now sitting at 33 million ounces silver equivalent. So, and likely to grow further this year again. So, that's within a couple of years. So, those are the sorts of opportunities we look at when we're evaluating projects.
And lastly, and concluding, just wondered what's the outlook for the next sort of 12 to 18 months for advanced metals? And is there anything else you want to share with our audience?
Yeah, look, we've talked about our silver assets. We also have a very high-grade gold asset in Victoria, in Australia, which is, well, in a way, is just as exciting. Um, Victoria once again been an area that's previously been considered a little bit hard to get exploration and mining done, but that's changing with changing governments and changing outlook on mining. We have a project there that we've been drilling on and off for the last year and a bit now. Exceptionally high grade gold in a place called Myrtleford, and that's something where we're continuing to progress, and we're looking at various options for how we can explore and potentially develop that asset as well. In terms of our outlook over the next 12 to 18 months, I think there's going to be a very strong focus on moving towards our 200 million ounce target in the medium term in Mexico. I would really like to be pushing us towards 150 million ounces by the end of the year. And that will come partly from our maiden JORC update at Gavilanes after this current drilling program we've already talked about. And then also a further update potentially at Yoquivo once we go back there and drill after Gavilanes. So, yeah, lots to look out for. And I guess just in terms of value proposition, we're currently sitting in probably the bottom 10% in terms of EV per ounce, around that 27 cents per ounce equivalent. So You look at our peers in the area, you look at our peers in Australia, many of them are operating at 10 times that level for equivalent resources. So as I mentioned, we're in a new company, but very, very excited about the upside potential as we move forward towards the end of this year, but also into the following years as well.
Adam, really appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for telling us about advanced metals and your silver projects in Mexico and obviously the gold project in Victoria, Australia. If our audience wants to reach out to you, if they want to obviously follow the story, how can they go about doing that, and what social media platform channels are you on?
Yeah, so Advance has a Twitter or X X platform. We're on LinkedIn. All of my contact details are on all of our releases. So feel free to reach out, ring me, whatever. Or my personal LinkedIn, I'm pretty active on that. So always happy to talk to anyone about our projects. It's exciting.
Yeah, great. We'll include those in the show notes accompany this episode for easy access, and obviously get updates from yourself. So yeah, obviously encourage our listeners to sign up and follow you on social media. So thank you again, and good luck for the year ahead. And maybe you want to come on the podcast later this year or even next year and give us an update.
Thanks, Rob. Great to talk.
Yeah, great. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed the episode. As always, appreciate your continued support. Please keep sharing these episodes far and wide. Obviously, we were speaking about precious metals, gold, silver, that I believe are dominating our mining industry at the moment. Obviously, recording this, prices are slightly down, but I do think they are on the upward trend moving forward. So thank you again for listening. Please keep sharing these episodes far and wide. Share them amongst colleagues that you know in the industry. And also, I suppose, share them to people outside of our mining industry to obviously help them educate our industry, and especially around precious metals. Thank you again for listening. And until next time, happy mining.